Welcome to the Embodied Sounds podcast, where we explore how music and sound add to our collective well-being in mind, body, and spirit. In order to keep this podcast free of advertising, please consider joining our Patreon community. Your support will go towards the creation of this show, as well as original music compositions and recording projects to help us all reduce stress and live a healthier and happier life. Learn more at www.embodiedsounds.com. In this episode, I got to interview my friend Jaffe. He is a vocalist, tabla player, multi-instrumentalist, composer, and record producer based in Santa Barbara, California. I met Jas touring on the Bhakti Yoga circuit in the west coast of the United States in the summer of 2018. We had a great friendship right away, and I've always appreciated his knowledge of tabla study, music as meditation, and just how to live a chill life without getting too stressed about life's little ups and downs. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Embodied Sounds podcast. My name is Joshua Sam Miller. I'm your host. So excited to be sharing with you today another conversation with a friend of mine who's an incredible musician, producer, and human being. His name is Jaffe, and we're excited to have him on the podcast. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, Josh. How are you doing?
So good, man. Where are you coming in from today?
I am calling in from beautiful Santa Barbara, California.
Right on. And I guess, to really dive into this conversation, we were just setting up our sound preferences in this Zoom call. Tell me, how has sound really been a part of your life over the years? Give me kind of an overview of how that's been a factor.
Oh, I love it. You cut right to the chase with the really juicy questions. That's why I love you, man. That's a great question. Sound is, so mystical, and there's really a lot I could say about it. I think, it's interesting. There's a lot I could say. I was just thinking the other day about, because I'm learning how to become a better mixing engineer, so to get pretty esoteric, talking shop right off the bat. I was thinking about how, you can use all this incredible technology these days, and there's so much technology to create and to consume and experience sound. But I was sort of thinking about it, and I'm like, the most amazing piece of technology that I personally have access to are my ears, and I mean, it sounds kind of silly and simple, but it's really true. It's a very sensual and visceral experience, and that's why people love music. That's why I love music, at least I can speak for myself, because it sort of hits you, like Bob Marley said, when the music hits, you feel no pain. It sort of like activates all these emotions and experiences in the body. Of course, as a kid, you hear cool things and they stimulate you. And then it developed more and more through these instruments, learning these different instruments. And I have a beautiful one here tonight that we can play with. Awesome. But as I learned how to play more music, each instrument has its own sound, right? And you learn how to create and generate those sounds, and I had the good fortune of studying world music, what's called world music. I mean, really, it's just the traditions of people, of cultures around the world. I learned tabla, I learned tambura, I learned sarod, I learned about raga, and the music of India really deeply influenced me. Plus, when I was 14, I got a djembe, a little drum, so learning rhythm. My first instrument was guitar. I started when I was 9, learning about that. Then I quickly moved to the bass, so trying out all these different instruments, and each instrument is like its own world, right? It's like meeting a new person, this new person is different than any other person you've ever met before. And if you really want to sort of appreciate them and get to know them, you have to you have to ask them questions like what you're doing with me. And each instrument has its own sound spectrum, you know, where it sounds good, where it's kind of on the threshold, where it's pushing. And then finally, I think the most important instrument for me is my voice, my singing voice, because then you get into truly just resonating from your body, you know, and finding the pitch and finding the rhythm, you know, clapping your hands, singing a note, and the experience of music that way, that just really visceral experience. And, you know, from there, I made a lot of music producing and stuff like that. And the last thing I'll say to answer your question is right now, what's become quite popular, which is also very ancient, is this thing called sound healing, right? So there's this whole science even really of using vibrations and tones to literally heal the body and to also affect the different states of brain waves, of consciousness, you know, things like that. So there's really just so much there. I mean, you know, you and I both love sound, and we could have this whole conversation just talking. I guess the podcast is called Embodied Sounds, so you know we're in it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I do like to jump right in. I'm a New Yorker by heart, and I don't think that's ever going to leave my soul, despite the amount of time I spend on the West Coast. Gosh, you know, so much there. You've really been a musician that I've met who's really devoted himself to this path, and that's felt, I think, by many of us in the music community. Really deep respect for how you've incorporated so many traditions into your music, and I definitely want to talk about the sound healing piece. That's definitely a theme for both of us, but kind of before we go there, I'm curious, in your studies of raga music and African percussion and African kora music, you know, in those cultures, have you observed this practice of playing music as being a part of the society's kind of ritual, or you know, is it used in a deeper way than maybe we use it here in the West? And if you can maybe talk a little bit about how you've experienced those traditional cultures over the years, I think that would be really interesting for us to hear about.
Yeah, that's a great question. Those are all great questions, and it's hard to sort of talk too generally about these sorts of things. But like, you know, probably the place I've spent the most amount of time is India. I've done one 4-month trip and one 3-month trip. You know, and one thing I did kind of that shocked me is sort of the musical literacy that you would find of often just normal people, you know, like people that didn't even consider themselves to be music. And me and my friends, we would comment on this all the time. Like you'd meet just a random person and they could just rip on the tablas. Like you'd put them a tabla and they would just sort of like rip on it. And like, and partly it's just because that is familiar to them. They've heard that music since they were a kid, so they could kind of evoke it, you know, and you know, that would happen, I guess, I'm assuming, in a society where there's more drumming, you know, people would have like a more innate sense of rhythm. You know, so I think, you know, again, I'm speaking about this sort of dancing around the issue because I don't really know the answer to that question ultimately. But I mean, in my experience of dealing with kids, I teach a lot of youth, and the more that people are exposed to music at a young age, the more that the music is just like a part of them, right? It's not a secondary thing. It's not a cerebral thing. It's something that comes out more. And you know, anecdotally, I'm sure you've experienced this too. You find this in other places more than others. Like, you know, if you ever hung out with like Brazilian people, right? You know, it's like there's all this like kind of music happening, and there's just sort of the vibe, you know?
Definitely. And thank you for your honesty on the part of the question that you can and can't answer. I totally respect the wanting not to generalize and make those types of broad statements, which is something, you know, I try and hold myself to as well. And well, I guess I know you've done a lot of work specifically in Korea, and I'm really curious to kind of hear more about how that came about, if you feel called to tell us some of that story and what your experience has been like as a Westerner in that country, offering music at yoga festivals and other events that you've been a part of.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been posting on Instagram lately a bunch about my experiences in Korea. And, there's one person that I really have to thank, and his name is Lee-Hyun Kim. And he's a really amazing guy and a yoga instructor. And he started with his team, a group of people, the Korea Yoga Conference and an event called Yoga Mala. So he hosts these sort of big, sort of premier yoga events, and I just got really, really lucky. It's funny, a lot of things in life is just sort of how it unfolds in this sort of mysterious way. And I met him at a yoga conference I was performing at in Thailand. And he liked my music. He bought all my CDs, and we just clicked. We just totally clicked. And so I was doing another event in Taiwan, actually. And it's interesting you mentioned Asia, because if you look at a map of like East Asia, it's a little bit like Europe, where there's like all these countries kind of close together, right? I mean, the United States is a huge, big country, right? But like other parts of the world, there's like little countries that are kind of all close together. So as a musician, you sort of travel around and places are somewhat close, So, as I was routing the tour, I was sort of doing these events in like Japan and stuff like that. And I actually didn't even think to go to Korea. It's interesting when you go there, it's a little bit off the beaten path. Obviously tourists go there and stuff, but it's not necessarily everyone's first destination. But it was just amazing. I mean, I just completely fell in love with the country, and yoga is very popular. They're very, very, very popular. So me as a yoga musician, it just really clicked, and I did a lot of events there the last 2 years, and I hope I get to go back soon. So yeah.
Nice. I hope you do as well, and that this worldwide kind of stay-at-home meditation retreat, as I'm calling it, passes us by. We move through it together. Well, I'm curious to know, like, can you remember back to an early time in your life where you maybe listened to someone or something that really inspired you, that you feel like sent you on this path that you've chosen to take in life? Is there a memory that comes back to you?
That's such a great question. And I almost sometimes when I'm doing these interviews, I wish like I was interviewing you. I need to start my podcast because I'm like, oh, he's got this great question. I'm curious what you're going to say, But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I really influenced by, classic rock. When I was a kid, I really loved classic rock, like Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin, and the music that came out in the 70s was just like had so much vibe, in the late 60s, early 70s. It just had so much energy and emotion behind it, and the sounds were so wild, they were experimenting so much. And I think that's when I just really got turned on by music in a really big way. And then shortly thereafter, I was exposed to Indian music from my first teacher, Montino Bourbon, who's an amazing individual who I've since gone on to become quite friends with and produce some of his music. And he plays the sarod. So he sort of got me into that. And then through him, I met Ali Akbar Khan, his teacher, the master musician, and then got into tabla. And so it opened up this huge portal that I went into in there. And, you also being a tabla player can appreciate what an epic journey that is. Like you learn your first na and suddenly you're like swept away, magnetized by all this,
Totally. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I remember when I was studying in Rishikesh, India, on my yoga teacher training, I had a tabla teacher. His name was Somnath Nirtan, and he taught me my first na, and it totally did just that. It blew my mind completely out of the water. And I think there's something about the language of tabla, which I'm going to ask you about next, I feel, that is just so mesmerizing and really does something up here for me where it's like both a mental workout and a mental kind of calming feeling. And I'm curious if that's the same for you, and how, yeah, your tabla practice has really become a part of your life.
Totally, man. Yeah, I'm so grateful I found tabla when I did. I think I was about 15 or 16 years old, and there's a lot going on in the teenage, psyche and body and everything, and having that to sort of divert my energy into was just amazing. I mean, the rhythm, learning about rhythm and the sounds, and feeling how it all fits together. I think someone told me once that tabla is actually really good for the brain, because it's like as you're doing different things with the two different sides of your body, it corresponds to the two different hemispheres of the brain, and it's just very like you said, stimulating and relaxing kind of at the same time. It just like fires on all cylinders, and it's very engaging. It's also very hard. I mean, you have to I don't know. It's like one of those things. It's almost like surfing or something. Like, if you don't sort of get it immediately, there's quite a wall that you have to push through to sort of get competent enough at it to start having fun. That's always the hardest part, is that I've taught a lot of students, and it's just so sad for me when they don't quite get through to that place, to the other side, to have fun. But I still think it's always valuable. I mean, every study is valuable. But you know what I'm saying? How like tabla is really hard, because like the lexicon, the technique, just making the freaking sounds is like not easy.
Totally.
So,
Totally.
it's a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear more about like what it does to your mind. What is going through your mind while you're playing tabla?
That's such a good question. I think only a tabla player would ask that question. And it's interesting. I mean, again, I have to preface this by saying I'm not a master tabla player, and I don't honestly think I ever will be. It's actually a little bit ironic. I'm gonna again preface that question, because you're asking me all this question about tabla, and the sort of funny thing is I'm somewhat, to be totally honest, moving a little bit away from tabla. And the reason is because tabla is such an incredibly difficult study, and as we mentioned, I spent 8 hours a day, at times doing it, like just layering experiences upon layering experiences to get proficient enough to even perform at the most basic level, and what happened is it sort of became, I don't know if the right word is eclipsed or something, by this incredible love and pursuit of singing. And for me, to be quite honest, singing did not come easily. I mean, I had my first vocal teachers when I was 14, and practicing it, but like I wasn't this kind of kid who had this golden voice and was like singing in the choir, and like I sort of had to, you talk about muscling your way through it. In a way, I sort of had to just like muscle my way into it, and just practice and woodshed. It's so hard, and it's become such an incredible journey, learning to cultivate my voice and singing in tune. But to go back to tabla, I think it depends sort of at what level you're at, right? Like I was someone like Zakir Hussain, like what is he thinking when he's playing? And, and I have asked this to tabla masters, and a lot of them say nothing, It's like Zakir says once, he said, we asked him point blankly, we're like, do you meditate? I don't know why we asked this question, but like someone was curious, and we're like, do you meditate? And he's like, music is meditation. I mean, just like he responded so quick, like, and then he's like, yeah, sometimes I do sitting meditation, but it was just like so quick. And to think about like what that really means, right? Like that music is meditation, what happens when you meditate, right? When you meditate, you're trying to eliminate thinking. You're trying not to think, right? So to say music is meditation is actually a really deep concept. And so it's like you sort of get to this point where there's a lot happening. It's like body reflex, intuition, creativity, composition. I mean, stuff is just sort of happening. And then you enter this kind of magical space where you're flowing, right? And so Indian music is very deep. I mean, all musics have this, I do believe, but in Indian music, there's actually like terms for this where the musicians have this kind of telepathic communication, right? Like that's actually the goal of Indian music. Classical Indian music. You train so much that you don't need to communicate to the other person about where you're going. You just like, it's instantaneous. And if you ever watched, any maestro like Ravi Shankar and Alaraka play together, right? You see that it's just these like, it's like a flock of birds, like that move, and you're like, who's directing it? You don't know. It's like, so it's very cosmic. The whole thing is like very deep and very cosmic. And I think when I enter that flow state, there's not a lot going on in my brain. I'm sort of just like putting things together, and it's like beautiful. I mean, that's kind of what you're going for. But again, it depends on so many aspects of the music. I mean, some music is very technical, and music is very subjective. Like some music is supposed to be mellow and some music is supposed to be fast. And again, that's another reason why I love Indian music, because it starts with the alap, right? It's got everything in one song, right? It starts with alap, which is no rhythm. And then the ghat comes in, it's really slow, right? And then it speeds up. And then suddenly they're like playing at some crazy fast speed. And in the middle, there's all these different feels. There's like funk and groove and triplets. And, it's so psychedelic. I mean, I can't even explain,
Great answer, man. Great answer. I love the concept that to really sit down and play an instrument like the tabla and as well as others. I want to hear more about your passion with the voice too, but to really be able to sit in that space and offer that, there can't be anything in here. It has to be empty in a sense.
Yeah.
And that concept, I think, it's very difficult for people to understand unless you felt it yourself, what that feels like. I remember early on in my studies of tabla, and I was starting to get into that space and just, performing and playing with other musicians and realizing what that feels like. It's very addictive. It's very, it feels amazing. And how to create more of that in our life without the reliance on medications and, prescription drugs and like unhealthy activities that really are detriment to our overall health and well-being is a big interest of mine, and one of the reasons why I founded this podcast. And just always fascinated by like this concept of music as meditation, music as medicine, and now I definitely want to call up Zakir Hussain to ask him some questions. Thanks for the advice.
He lives up in the Bay Area. Maybe, he's pretty busy though. Although who knows what he's doing now? I mean, that's a trippy thing, is all musicians are kind of off this year. It's like our big holiday.
Yeah, man. Well, and with the voice, too, kind of, since you mentioned it, like, how has that really kind of been a journey for you, and what? There's so many questions to ask about the voice, but I'm curious, like, what did you really have to kind of look at and push through to develop, that muscle and confidence and willingness to sing? Because I know that is a big barrier for a lot of people. So how did you kind of like move through some of that, and maybe you're still moving through it,
One of the huge parts of singing is sort of gaining a certain amount of confidence, and learning how to deliver that in the moment, and it takes a lot of practice. I mean, it takes a lot of practice just to sort of sing in tune, and so part of singing is developing the ear. And also there's so many timbres of the voice, right? Learning about how to make the sounds, the different resonating chambers, there's 4 of them apparently in your body, from the chest cavity up, through the nasal cavity of the head. And so using the body as a resonator, breath, I mean, that's a whole trippy reality, is it's very yogic in a way, is you have to time it to the breath, and learn how the breath supports the note, and learning the volume, learning the diction, the enunciation, curing bad habits. I mean, I think ultimately the main thing is learning by doing. I mean, you have to do it. And in one way, that's one of the things I think I love the most. I mean, there's a lot of things I love about it but of kirtan music, I love kirtan in so many ways. And kirtan is great because it's like, you can't pick a better woodshed art form. I mean, you repeat the same thing over and over and over again for like hours, right? And it gets faster, and it's, and so for a lot of people, it's annoying almost because it's so repetitive. But to learn how to sing is like the perfect thing, right? You just sing and sing and sing and sing and sing, and so that's cool. Is doing that, and then singing songs. Again, it's like tabla. It's like, what are you singing? What are you singing? And some things are hard to sing. Some things are easy to sing. Learning how to pitch your voice. Right. I mean, I guess I'm sort of answering the question with this scattergun approach, but it's a big topic. I mean, it's a really big topic, but ultimately, you just got to do it. Every day you have to practice, and the more you practice, the more it's just there for you when you need it,
Totally. So. And yeah, I guess like kind of going back a little bit to what we were talking about before of, as a tabla player, it's very hard to get started, but when you can push you to the other side, this whole world is available. Is that the same with the voice? And kind of, if so, if you were talking to a very new vocal student who was maybe struggling to really develop that practice and kind of, still on that side, what would you say to that person of like, why is it worth it to devote to that practice? What is waiting for you when you can achieve or feel the power of your own voice? Kind of tell us what that feels like.
Oh, such a good question. I assume you're also a teacher, because you must be a teacher if you've thought about all this stuff, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I haven't really accepted myself yet as a music teacher, because I still consider myself to be quite young in that, but have taught meditation and kind of sound as a meditative practice. And I used to lead backpacking trips with kids in the wilderness for like 2 to 3 weeks and really like teach about just life in that natural setting, which is, I think, the real world, So yeah, that's some of my like teaching experience. But it's like, I really just always had a curious mind, really, and remember how resistant I was to doing my practices, and know that's very difficult for people, to get started with anything that's new. I think I heard if you can do something for 30 days, then you're good, and maybe that's, I wonder if you agree with that philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that again, to go back to the teaching thing, the reason why I asked that question is the reality is that everyone is different, right? And some people, you say practice this for 30 days and they're just like, cool, and they're off to the races. And some people, you say practice this for 30 days and it's like freaking pulling teeth at the dentist office, and everything in between. I also teach kids. I have kid students, and sometimes it's just, it's a losing battle. They're not gonna practice, but they will play that 1 hour lesson with you once a week, right? So that's their practice. And so, in that sort of, like, let's take the most extreme situation. What do I say to someone like that? I say, number one, I say, think about music. Even if you don't practice, think about it. Like, think about playing that chord, think about playing that song, just think about it in your mind. You don't even have to pick up the instrument. Just think about it. And, and then the next thing I do, especially if someone's a little older, it's a little bit hard with really young kids, but, the main thing I try and impress upon people is, it should be fun. It should be fun. That's really important, is that it should be fun. And, like, let's take a tabla example, okay? Some tabla players don't like deri, right? Some tablas don't like deri. It's just too hard, or they don't like, I don't know, Rayla, or I don't know, I'm just sort of riffing, but they really like playing, I don't know, folk rhythms or whatever it is. They really like playing something really fast. They play like really fast, terakita exercises or something. So, like, if that's fun for someone, they should do that. They should do what's fun, and then gradually increase it from there. Like sitting down at your instrument to practice and play should be like a really awesome experience. Like, it shouldn't be like this going to the salt mines kind of a thing. Like, so that's the thing, is that music should be fun, and then the joy of music will come from there. Like, to continue and finish with that analogy, Swapan Chowdhury, the maestro, who is my teacher, one of my main tabla teachers, he is considered pretty much across the board as like the master of deri, the stroke with your full hand. And it's just amazing. Even Zakir Hussain will say his deri is like the best. It's like, it sounds like a machine gun. It's like, and you're like, how do you do that? And he says, we asked him, how do you do that? And he says he just really liked it. He really liked to practice it, and he would just practice it all the time, and so then you get amazingly good at it. And so, like, it's sort of a bigger analogy. I'll just finish the thought here of, music in general, like, because as you become a professional musician and you start touring and playing and trying to actually make a living at it, which is really freaking hard, like, the main thing that I tell people and that people have told me is you follow the love. You asked me, why did you go to Korea? Because there was a lot of love there for me, and, these awesome gigs and these awesome opportunities. And so follow that love. If you're trying to go somewhere and it's just like, door closed, door closed, door closed, it's like, okay, get the message. That's not the place to go, like, go somewhere else, And so, like, that's kind of the idea with music, is that, go to that open door and, like, go in there. You can't do everything in life, right? So if that's a message, basically, is that if something's not working, like, there's a reason for that. So does that answer your question?
It does, and so many more. That was a great answer. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this kind of transitions us into a topic I like to always ask about on these interviews, which is something you were speaking to at the end there, about noticing when doors are closing in life versus when they're opening. And, how have you, I'd say, been a listener in your life, both to music, to yourself, to the world? Has that topic and way of being resonated with you over the years? And in thinking about, like, how much we're struggling today in our society to really listen to each other, Yeah, I feel like there's a good conversation there.
Oh, there's so many conversations there. I mean, you just really get to the heart of so many crucial issues that we're dealing with. And, music is amazing. Music is really amazing. And the people that do it as a living, they're some of the trippiest people that you'll ever met. They've sort of traveled around the world. They know people from all different countries, and even not even in the modern times, but like going way back last century, even like way back into history, like musicians were the ones who were the travelers, the wanderers, right? That were sharing news and going to different places and going to different trade routes and stuff like that. Like they had to. That was, it was the sort of it gets to the heart of like the struggle, which is also the blessing of being a musician, is that, there's only so many cushy, first chair cello gigs around there, right? Where you you get a nice fat house in the city you want to live in. I mean, the sort of the blessing and curse of being a musician is you've got to travel your freaking ass off, and so where I'm going with that is that in general, what I find about a lot of musicians is they're really open-minded people. They've had a lot of experiences. They've been to a lot of different places, and they're very open-minded, and they it doesn't matter where someone is from. It's like you learn to listen to someone's story, and because that's what music is. It's about telling stories, and you first need to listen. If you can't listen, you can't sing, you can't play it. You have to really deeply listen, and so that listening, is relevant on so many levels. It's literally what you have to do, but as you were so eloquently saying, you also have to sort of listen to the ebb and the flow of life. Is this the right choice to make in life? Is that the right choice to make in life? It's very spiritual. There's so many changes in life. I mean, and that's part of being a musician, is just being really flexible in so many ways. But the last thing I want to talk about is like the challenge of sort of making a living as an artist. That's really difficult, and it's only getting harder, especially with COVID right now, and not being able to perform. And so again, it's like it's getting to the deepest part of how creative can you be? How creative can you be? And so like for me, I've been doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on like studio work, on learning how to become a better mixing engineer, learning how to become a better producer, create music, stuff I can do and I don't have to travel. So retooling and making videos, learning a new instrument. Speaking of which, we should bust this thing out in a second.
Yeah.
But yeah, does that kind of answer your question?
It does. Definitely. Thank you. And I was really touched by the article you wrote for LA Yoga on the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual benefits of sound as a healing modality. And I feel like the album you released last year, meditation music, was really well received to support people sleep better. And I'm curious if you could tell us a bit about kind of how you created that album and where some of your thoughts are in the genre of sound healing.
Wow, that's such a great question again, Josh. Thank you for that. And I have to give a big thank you to LA Yoga and the editor Felicia Tomasco, and also my co-writer Natalie McComb, who's a yoga teacher and author down in Los Angeles. That was really fun. It was my first ever published article, and hopefully I get to do it again. But yeah, as we spoke earlier about music and the connection between that and meditation, particularly, I have a history of meditation. As a child, even my parents introduced me to meditation, which I'm very grateful that they did that. I think it's a great thing to introduce anyone to, but especially kids. Meditation is a beautiful and powerful practice, and as you meditate, these things kind of become revealed to you, that sort of the way the mind works, the way the thinking process and the associative process. And it's basically trying to understand your consciousness, right? Like not understand the body, but understand, I can't even point to it. Where is the consciousness, right? It's such a cosmic question. Where is the consciousness? And it's constantly changing. So like in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, let's see if I get this right. I sometimes mess this up, but it says yoga vrita chitta nirodha, or maybe it's yoga chitta, vrita, chitta, nirodha. But chitta is consciousness, vrita is waves, and nirodha is cessation. So what he's saying is that yoga is the cessation of the waves of the mind, of the thought waves, right? So he's basically saying that yoga is meditation. And this concept that what we're trying to do is stop the mind. Just stop it for a second, because in this modern world, it's always going. I mean, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, and even when you're sleeping, it doesn't stop. The mind never stops. And that's great. That's great because it solves all these problems, right? And it does all these amazing things, but it can like literally drive you crazy, So you have to have a certain amount of control over your mind. And so through meditation, this, slowly you experience that. One of my favorite parts of Indian music, lap, okay, and ah means without. So it's without the rhythm, the alap section. It's very, very beautiful. There's no rhythm at all. It's just sort of this wash of sound. It's very cosmic. It's very psychedelic. And I remember when I would listen to it, it would sort of just put me in this state. You would hear the tambura, the strings of the tambura, and then you would hear the beginnings of the raga, the melody. And it was just so slow and it was so mellow that I just loved it. It was so watery and liquid, and it just made me feel all these emotions. So then that's not the only style of music that does that. There's these styles like ambient music, like Brian Eno and Terry Riley, and these sort of luminaries of this style of music that some people call minimalism, and electronica sometimes touches on that. Even dub, dub reggae goes to those places where like everything drops out and there's this echo, echoing and shimmering, and you're just in the zone, And so I kind of made this connection that's sort of my favorite part of like all music, is when you're sort of in this sort of amniotic zone, for lack of a better word. It's just like envelopes you, and it's so eerie, And so I decided to make this album of music specifically designed for this experience, and as I did it, because I'm kind of cerebral, I studied about it and I learned about all these trippy things called like brainwave entrainment. So entrainment means synchronization, right? Where two things are disparate and they become synchronized. And your brain is doing that. It has these actual waves, literal waves, like what Patanjali was talking about, apparently, and interestingly enough, the slower they get, the more relaxed you are, right? And so as the brain goes through these cycles of brain waves from the high, the alpha, the beta state, the gamma state, which are high, down to the delta and the theta state, that's when you become very relaxed, very, very relaxed. And that actually happens in meditation. So like they've done these studies where they put, these ways to observe the brain waves on like monks and master meditators, and they actually visibly see the brain waves descend down to these super mellow states. And it also corresponds to like deep sleep, REM sleep, and places where the body is deeply restful. And one thing, I know this is a long-winded answer to your story, but again, I really am into this kind of stuff. So I realized, and this might be obvious to everyone, but it sort of hit me like a epiphany, that society desperately needs to just, for lack of a better word, just chill out, and we all collectively need to go down to the theta wave state more, and all, meditate and sort of become at peace, more at peace. There's so much frenetic energy in the world, and so people need help to do that. They actually literally need help to do that, and so that was the goal of the music project, was to create an album for that. And I think it was successful. It charted on Billboard, which was amazing, on the New Age chart. So it came in at number 3 on its first week, and thank you, Jesus. And and it's done good things. So it sort of put me out there, and more in that way. But yeah, that's sort of a long-winded answer to your question. And so the sound healing article sort of came out of that process. It's funny that, as you mentioned, the album came out in 2019, and then the sound healing article just came out like last month or something. So sometimes these things take a long, long time to roll out. But the goal was actually to have them be kind of together, because as you can see from this very long-winded answer, there's a lot to explain there. There's a lot to unpack in this, and then again, it gets into sound healing, and that's what's happening in sound healing with the gongs and the bowls. Is another way to sort of entrain the brain and to get people into these states.
Fantastic answer, my brother. That was so spot on and so interesting. Yeah, thank you for the detail. It's really been a passion of mine over the years, ever since being introduced to sound as a therapeutic device about 4 years ago, to really understand what's going on. And we definitely share a lot of overlap there. Would you like to play?
Yeah, let's do it.
Something for us. I feel like we've chatted for quite a bit here. It's been a little bit over an hour, so let's.
I know, it's good.
You want to tell us a little bit about what you're playing, and then we'll listen?
Sure. So this is a beautiful instrument. It's actually called an ngoni, but it actually is more like a kora, because as you can see here, it's got 15 strings. So ngoni and kora are related instruments from West Africa. And this is made by my friend Biko Cassini, who is the percussionist for Rising Appalachia, the incredible band. And he made this, which is a truly remarkable instrument. If you notice, Josh, it's made out of a baya shell. Do you see that?
I just saw that. That is so cool, man.
So I know, it's trippy as heck. So it's normally a gourd, but this is a baya shell. So he sold it to me, and he's like, you need to have this one. He didn't even want to sell it, but so thank you, Biko. Thank you so much, Mr. Biko. It's like my one instrument where, there's a few pieces I'm trying to learn to play, but in general, I just explore. I just totally explore with it and sort of just have fun. And, that's sort of what I do. So, yeah. Okay, let's do a little jam. I wish we were synced up and you could play with me, but they haven't figured that out on Zoom yet.
Totally. Soon enough, my brother. Soon enough.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Joss. That
Thank
was
you.
beautiful. Wow, man.
Oh,
So
thanks.
talented. So talented. Gosh. My
Just
mind
a
is much
little
quieter
something.
right now, so I'm just kind of taking that all in. Was that something you had prepared, or was that improvised?
Just sort of playing around. Yeah.
Oh, it's so great, man. I definitely miss playing with you, and look forward to when we can do that again.
Oh, it's going to be so great, dude. I mean, when this happens again, I mean, the music is just going to be freaking epic. I mean,
Totally.
I was just texting with my friend who Cayenne, the great drummer down in Topanga Canyon, LA, and how much we miss each other. I posted a photo today, and it was with him and me playing, and with our friends Johanna and Karen and Tom, and it was just like it just gets me here. I mean, it's been over a year. I haven't like played any music, I mean, obviously I played a lot of music, but not the same way, these bands
Yeah.
and events. And so yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are feeling the same thing. But I mean, gosh, like we're positive people, right? And what can you say? How can you spin it? Absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? It's just going to be so beautiful when it happens again. It's going to be so epically beautiful. And like, that's a
Totally.
beautiful thing, right? That's a beautiful thing.
I love that. I love that, and I love all of the music that's being released during COVID, where all of us have had the time to be at home in the studio, really making things that sound really nice and really pleasing
Yeah.
to share. I feel like the quality of content has just been like kind of off the charts in the last year.
Speaking of
So-
which, here's the moment. Why don't you tell me and them about your stuff? You have a new album, right?
Totally, man. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, but I need to do a podcast interview, where I'm on the other side one of these days. But I do have a new album coming out. I've been collaborating with Will Marsh on sitar, really incredibly devoted, studied musician of the raga system as well. And yeah, we approached this project as a purely experimental mission and just said, let's hang out and jam and see what happens. And about 10 months later, we now have 8 tracks that are going into mastering with the very talented Ben Leinbach as our final engineer to kind of push us over the hurdle. So super grateful to him. And
Wow.
this has been my first project producing, mixing, and recording myself and playing, of course. So it's taught me a lot. I've had to really get over my resistance to sit in front of a computer screen and actually work with Ableton Live on a regular basis and learn that software. So it's been a big COVID project for me. And I'm so stoked to share it, man. It's inspired by Indian music, of course, and kind of brings in a very mystical, at times Middle Eastern, evocative soundscape. And I have really been adapting my tabla practice onto the handpans, which I have a few back there, and kind of playing those traditional beats, the tintals, the ektals, on these melodic instruments that are just so gorgeous. I really consider these to be like sound sculptures. And yeah, to really create that trance and that groove that I've been so blessed to learn from my teachers, including Amina Chisti from Fanafiola, real studied tabla player and a disciple of, well, a student of Ustad Dildar Hussain Khan in northern Pakistan, and just adapting these kind of traditional rhythms to be on a more modern instrument. The handpan's less than 100 years old.
Wow.
So it's really
Cool.
it's really fresh, and yeah, we're still working on the title of the of the album, but that will come through, I'm sure, and we'll look forward to share it when we can. You know.
And so, do you have a release date yet, or you're not sure yet?
We do not have a release date yet. We are
Okay.
We are still in those final stages, but it will be coming soon, and you know, all of the info will be shared on the Embodied Sounds website and email list. So
Sweet.
definitely check that out.
I can't wait. That's
Thanks,
gonna
man.
be great.
It's been
Yeah.
a wonderful growth step for me to really stay focused on producing an album. So that's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Awesome.
yeah, you know, let's see what else. You know, the Embodied Sounds community is growing right now. We are kind of a space online for folks like us who have experienced sound in this way to share what we have experienced in a safe container, and really attract an audience that is looking to get into this world of meditative music and have a bit of that process supported, you know, because there's so much available on Spotify, so much available on YouTube, that I personally find it sometimes overwhelming to choose something.
Yeah.
So
It's true. It's
Embodied Sounds is kind of growing right now as a collective and a future platform that will allow, you know, people to receive high quality content that's really designed for their optimal well-being. And yeah, we're in an early growth stage right now, but I'm confident that it will develop that organic flow, and trying to listen as best I can to really, you know, run with that. So yeah, that's what's kind of going on my side. And is there anything else you'd like to say before we close?
I can't wait to hear your album. That's going to be so exciting, and the podcast and everything. And you know, yeah, there was a number of things you said there that I resonated with. There's really actually a lot that's out there right now. The volume of content is just so high. It's hard to keep up with it. I even find it's hard to keep up with like just what I'm doing. Like I'm like, when did I release that song? You know, like you're like, you know, it's just crazy. It's crazy. So I feel like I need to have these conversations with other musicians. I want to like interview them and just like tell me about your music, you know, like sure, I can go to Spotify and see their releases and everything, but it's like, you know, I mean, I don't know. There's just so much there. It's like for someone to even make one song, you know, I mean, all the stories behind it, and it's just amazing. I mean, it's just amazing. And in a way, that's sort of what I miss the most about, you know, what we're lacking right now is the community and these sort of curated experiences. You know, that's the thing I miss the most about festivals and stuff like that, is just the storytelling and just really hearing and seeing another person and hearing, you know, their story and how they, you know, got to where they are, what they're going through right there. So I just want to salute you for doing these types of podcasts, because it's really needed, you know, it's to get this deeper, this depth, you know, that's just not there on the surface level. And so thank you. And yeah, we talked about a lot of cool stuff, man. This was deep. We jumped right in, and I feel like, you know, your literacy, your sound literacy, sonic literacy just allowed me to open up and just really go deep on some of these things, abstract, you know, and esoteric, and it's fun to have someone to rap with about all that stuff. So thank you.
You got it, my friend, anytime. And thank you all so much for watching or listening, and be sure to subscribe, check out our upcoming episodes and all the information at embodiedsounds.com. Peace out. Have a good night.